Number 9. Volkswagen Beetle. By 1970, the Volkswagen Beetle had been selling in the United States for more than 15 years. In that year, Volkswagen sold 569,696 cars in the American market, of which approximately 405,615 were Beetles, a volume that made it one of the most visible vehicles on American roads at the start of the decade. The Beetle's cultural position in the early 1970s was unlike any other cars. It had become the vehicle of the counterculture in the 1960s, appeared in films and on album covers, and accumulated an affection from its owners that was qualitatively different from what most cars produced. The air-cooled rear engine was easy to work on, the parts were inexpensive and widely available. The fuel economy was excellent by the standards of a decade that had just been reminded of what oil supply disruption felt like. American Beetle sales declined through the mid-1970s as Japanese competition improved and VW's pricing rose with exchange rates. The last Beetles were sold in the American market in 1977, but across the first half of the decade, no imported car was more present on American roads or more deeply embedded in American life. Number 8. Honda Civic. The first-generation Honda Civic arrived in the United States in 1972 as a 1,500-pound car producing approximately 50 horsepower from a 1.2-liter engine. It looked like a serious concession to practicality. It turned out to be a statement about what a small car could be when engineered with seriousness rather than compromise. The Civic's fuel efficiency was immediately relevant, arriving 2 years before the 1973 oil crisis and remaining a commercial argument for the rest of the decade. Its CVCC engine technology, introduced in 1975, allowed the Civic to meet American emission standards without a catalytic converter, a compliance solution that American manufacturers were simultaneously struggling to implement without destroying performance. Consumer Reports rated the Civic among the most reliable cars available in the American market across the late 1970s. The Civic did not sell in the volumes of the Pinto or the Cutlass. It did something more consequential. It established what American buyers came to expect from a small car in terms of fuel economy, reliability, and build quality, and helped redefine what Americans expected from a small car. Number 7. Ford Maverick. The Ford Maverick arrived in 1970, priced at $1,995, a figure Ford's marketing made the centerpiece of its launch campaign. At that price, in that year, the Maverick outsold the Mustang in its debut season and established itself immediately as one of the most commercially effective economy cars Detroit had ever produced. Total North American production reached approximately 2.1 million units across the model's 8-year run, a volume that placed the Maverick among the significant commercial presences. The 1973 oil crisis increased its sales rather than damaging them, as buyers who had been considering larger vehicles reconsidered at the gas pump. The Maverick was not a sophisticated car. The platform was borrowed from the 1960 Falcon. The interior reflected its price, and the quality record that emerged over ownership years confirmed that Ford had built it aggressively to a price point. But none of that changed what the Maverick represented in American driveways throughout the decade. The affordable, domestic, simple car that American families bought when they needed something that started every morning and cost as little as possible to own. Number 6. AMC Gremlin. The AMC Gremlin holds a date in automotive history that no other car can claim. April 1, 1970, April Fool's Day, the day American Motors introduced the first American-built subcompact, beating the Ford Pinto to the market by several months and establishing that the domestic industry was finally willing to build small. American Motors designed the Gremlin under budget constraints that were visible in the finished product. The shortened Hornet platform, the minimal rear treatment, the interior trim that communicated economy rather than value. But the Gremlin did what it was built to do. It gave American buyers who wanted a small domestic car a reason to walk into an AMC showroom instead of a Volkswagen dealership. It sold for 8 years in numbers that sustained a manufacturer whose resource base was a fraction of Ford's or GM's. Its place in the memory of the 1970s is not as a great car, but as a genuinely American response to a changing market, built cheaply, marketed aggressively on affordability, and driven by millions of Americans who needed basic transportation and chose to buy it domestic. Number 5. Toyota Corolla. The Toyota Corolla did not arrive in the 1970s as a novelty. It arrived as a product whose reliability record had already begun building the reputation that would make it, by the end of the decade, the best-selling nameplate in the world. American buyers in the early 1970s who chose the Corolla were making a practical decision: a small car with better fuel economy than most domestic alternatives, a reliability record that Consumer Reports documented consistently above the American compact class average, and a resale value that reflected what the ownership record made plausible. The 1973 oil crisis accelerated the Corolla's American sales significantly, as it did for most Japanese compacts, but unlike some imports that benefited temporarily from the crisis, the Corolla retained buyers through the second half of the decade on the strength of its record rather than its timing. By the end of the 1970s, American buyers had learned to associate Japanese cars with a reliability standard that domestic manufacturers had not matched. The Corolla, more than any other single model, is the vehicle through which that lesson was delivered to the mainstream American market. Number 4. Chevrolet Nova. The Chevrolet Nova may be the single most overlooked car on any list of the 1970s, not because it was unusual, but because it was so relentlessly ordinary that its ubiquity became invisible. It was simply everywhere in enormous numbers throughout the entire decade. The Nova occupied the compact segment of the Chevrolet lineup at a price that made it accessible to buyers who wanted a straightforward domestic car without economy car compromises. The inline-6 and small-block V8 options gave it flexibility from basic transportation to the mild performance of the SS trim. Parts were cheap, dealers knew it, and nothing about owning one challenged any general practice shop. In the 1970s American suburb, the Nova was the car in the neighbor's driveway, the car the older sibling drove to work, the car parked outside every apartment complex and strip mall in the country. Its absence from most iconic 1970s lists says more about how we remember the decade than about how common the Nova actually was, which was among the most common cars on American roads throughout the entire decade, in every state and every kind of neighborhood.
Number 3. Ford Pinto. Before the safety controversy that defines its historical legacy, the Ford Pinto was simply one of the best-selling American cars of 1974, a fact that more than 3 million buyers across its production run confirmed with their purchase decisions. Ford built the Pinto in under 25 months to compete with the imports, gaining ground in the American subcompact segment. The price was low, the packaging was practical, and in the early years of its production, the car did what economy car buyers needed it to do. By 1974, when fuel prices made economy the single most important purchase criterion for a significant portion of American buyers, the Pinto was positioned perfectly. More than 544,000 were sold that year. The safety record that emerged from crash testing and the internal cost-benefit analysis later revealed in civil litigation gave the Pinto a historical identity that its sales figures alone would never have produced. But in American driveways of the mid-1970s, the Pinto was simply everywhere. In apartment parking lots, at high school curbs, in the driveways of families for whom $2,000 was the most important number in any automotive transaction. Number 2. Oldsmobile Cutlass. The Oldsmobile Cutlass was the best-selling car in the United States in both 1975 and 1976, among the top sellers for most of the decade. By the mid-1970s, the Cutlass line accounted for more than 40% of Oldsmobile's total sales volume,
a concentration that reflected how completely one model had come to define a brand in the American market. The Cutlass's appeal was broadly applicable in a way that made it competitive across buyer segments. It was available in configurations ranging from the base Cutlass Supreme Coupe to the sportier 442, covering enough of the market to appear in suburban driveways alongside ranch houses and in urban parking garages with equal plausibility. The 350 cubic inch V8 that powered most versions of the car provided the performance that American buyers still expected in the mid-decade years when emissions regulations had softened the competition's outputs. The 1978 Cutlass sold approximately 520,000 units, a figure that placed it among the highest volume individual model years of the decade. The Cutlass was not a car people talked about. It was a car people simply owned in enormous numbers across the entire decade. Number 1. Chevrolet full-size line, Impala and Caprice. Chevrolet's full-size line dominated American sales for most of the decade, leading the annual charts in 1971, 1972, 1973, 1977, 1978, and 1979. Few nameplates were more consistently present in the American driveway across the full span of 10 years. The full-size Chevrolet was, for much of the 1970s, the default American car, the vehicle that families bought when they needed seating for 5 or 6, when they towed a boat, when they drove distances that made the Pinto's economy arguments irrelevant relative to the Impala's comfort. The 1977 downsizing, which reduced the car's weight by approximately 700 pounds and its length by a foot, reinvigorated sales at the moment when fuel economy had become a purchase criterion even for full-size buyers. In 1977, more than 654,000 Impala and Caprice trim levels were sold. The most popular configuration was the Caprice Classic sedan, with over 212,000 units that year. For any American who grew up in the 1970s, the Impala is not a car that requires introduction. It is the car in the driveway, idling in the school pickup line, filling every parking lot in the country. The decade's most universal automotive experience.